We are now into April, so it's time to look back at March. This month we played Maidenhead United, Dagenham and Redbridge, Southend, Bromley and York City. The first game of the month. vs Maidenhead United on the 4th at York Road. But before we go into that game, earlier in the season we won 1-0 with a goal from Aaron Hayden. But back to this game. The starting lineup was Howard in goal, a back three of Tozer, Tunnicliffe and Cleworth, Jacob Mendy and Barnett in fullbacks, a midfield of Cannon, Young and Lee, and up top Mullin and Dalby. In the game, Mullin opened the scoring in the 28th as Mendy crossed the ball into Mullin's head, as he headed it in the bottom right corner. Then in the second half Smith equalised in the 58th minute. Then 2 minutes later, Mullin put us back in front with his second of the game, with another header from Young's corner. But sadly we conceded a late equaliser in the 90th minute, only picking up 1 point on the road. We continue to the second game of the month, versus Dagenham and Redbridge on Tuesday, the 7th at Victoria Road. But before we go into that game, earlier in the season at the racecourse we won 4-1 and 2 goals from both Palmer and Mullin. But back to this game, the starting lineup was Langton in goal, a back three of Tozer, O'Connell and Tunnicliffe, Mendy and Barnett in wingbacks, a midfield of Cannon, James Jones and Lee, and Mullin and Palmer up top. Palmer makes a strong return, scoring in just 6 minutes before Tunnicliffe made it 2 from a corner. In the 39th minute, Palmer then got his second of his return in the 49th minute. Mendy then secured the win, scoring the 4th in the 69th minute in a top performance, ending our poor form at Victoria Road. Into the third game versus Southend, back at the racecourse on Saturday, 11th in the snow. But again, before we go into the game, in the game earlier in the season we drew 0-0 at Roots Hall. But back to the snow, the lineup was Langton in goal, the same back three of Tozer, O'Connell and Tunnicliffe, Barnett and Mendy also keep their spots, same as the midfield three as Cannon, James Jones and Lee, and Mullin and Palmer up top. The game was mainly Wrexham, we just couldn't find that goal, and it was decided by a mistake from the goalkeeper scoring an own goal, with the game finishing 1-0. Back on the road at Hayes Lane versus Bromley on Saturday 18th. But yet again before that, in the game earlier in the season at the racecourse, it ended 1-1, with goals from Mullin and James Jones. But back to this month's game, the lineup was the same again, apart from Jordan Davies coming in for Elliot Lee, and after a strong first half, we could have been at least 2 up, but in the process Langton got injured, and as we know he's out for the rest of the season. So Howard came on in his place as Mullin puts us 1 up in the 56th minute before making it 2 4 minutes later. But 3 minutes later, Cheek scored a consolation goal for Bromley, but we held on, winning 2-1. And in the final game of the month on the 25th, back at the racecourse versus York City. But before that, in the game earlier in the season, it ended in a 1-1 draw, with a late overhead kick from O'Connor before conceding a late equaliser from Dooku. But back to this game, as the starting lineup was Faster returning to the racecourse in goal, a back three of Tozer, O'Connell and Tunnicliffe, Mendy and Barnett in wingback, and a midfield three of Cannon, James Jones and Lee, and Mullin and Palmer up top. In the 42nd minute, James Jones had a shot from outside the box that hit the crossbar and deflected in of the goalkeeper. And after a dominant performance, we secured the win with 2 late goals from Dalby and Elliot Lee, finishing the month on a positive, winning 3-0. So after a successful month, winning 4 and drawing 1, what would you rate Wrexham's March out of 10?